Hi everyone, it's Nick with Build Up Advisory Group, and it's Fast Forward Fridays, a web series where we will quickly build what you know about infrastructure design in the nonprofit sector. Today's Fast Forward topic is the key elements of a service agreement. We talk a lot about grant making and grant agreements, but there's another agreement that's used considerably within nonprofits and philanthropies. That agreement is the service agreement. So operationally, it's important to know how to use this tool effectively. I wanted to share my top 3 considerations for nonprofits and philanthropies engaging service providers. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the more obvious considerations like intellectual property, lobbying limitations and restrictions, and political campaign activity restrictions because I think we pay attention to these issues quite a bit. Instead, the 3 considerations I'll share with you are parts of the service agreement that I think many organizations ignore, gloss over, or think there aren't real implications for. The first of those 3 considerations is payment terms. Now, you're probably thinking, Nick, of course I pay attention to the payment terms. I want to make sure that I can actually pay this service provider. And that's universally true. What I find, though, is that organizations gloss over the specifics of those payment terms because of organizational defaults. So, for example, an organization's policy might be to ask for payment on the first month of each quarter. Why? Well, because that's just how the template reads. Or they make a payment based solely on the service provider's invoice without thinking about their own cash flow. My point here is that in addition to the dollars that are flowing out of the organization, pay attention to the way that they're flowing and make sure that that flow nicely aligns with your cash flow projections, the timing of the work, and that you question if you have default organizational payment requirements. These payment terms are critical, so we want to make sure we're structuring them appropriately. The second consideration is indemnification terms. I know that you've seen indemnification provisions in agreements. I also know that many people skim these provisions at best and largely act as though the indemnification provision never existed in the first place. Indemnification is about how each party will protect the other from third party, someone who's not a party to the agreement, claims of damages. So it's critical that you understand under what circumstances you'll have to protect someone or cover the losses incurred by the other party because of a third party claim. Ignoring this indemnification provision or not determining when you think you should and shouldn't pay in those instances is a mistake. And it's one that I see so many organizations making because they don't understand the purpose of the indemnification provision as it relates to the scope of the work. The more risk involved in the work, the more you should be paying attention to this provision. The language in this provision should always be right-sized for your organization. And even if the provision is lengthy, and I've definitely seen those, you should always identify the core function of this provision. The last consideration is about confidentiality. Again, you're probably thinking, Nick, we know that confidentiality is important, so why are you pointing it out? Well, my point here is that you should identify exactly what constitutes confidential information. What we pay attention to in this provision is not only about disclosure. Disclosure terms are usually pretty straightforward. What's really fundamental is the underlying definition of confidential information. I've seen agreements where confidential information is so broad, it literally could include an email saying hello to the other party. So be very careful in carving out what constitutes confidential information. And ensure that the protection for your confidentiality agreement doesn't expire at the end of the agreement unless you choose it to. Having a party agree to keep truly confidential information confidential going forward is reasonable. Getting this provision right will ensure a smooth contractual relationship, ensure the right kinds of materials and information are protected, and it will set a precedent throughout the organization about the definition of confidential information, how you're protecting it, and how you're monitoring and tracking its use. And just like that, you can strengthen your organizational infrastructure by paying attention to these provisions within your agreements. One small tweak to any of them can make a huge difference and ultimately impact your organization's bottom line, flexibility, and resilience. And we pay attention so that we can continue to protect the charitable assets that are needed to impact the marginalized communities we serve. And that's our fast build. I want to hear how you were thinking about service agreement provisions. I would love to hear from you and about your experience in the comments below. And if you're finding these Fastball Fridays helpful or informative, I would love it if you would like this video and hit subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful weekend and keep building bravely.